Okay, it is time for Jerry and the Goddesses part Answer Your Goddamn Questions. Um, so before I begin with the questions, I'm going to make a little announcement here. I have made a Patreon. I will be including a link to that in a number of places that I post this. Hopefully, I will be able to include a link to that in TikTok, but I'm not sure. It'll definitely be in the YouTube version of this, which will be one solid video. TikTok will probably be chopped up into approximately 10-minute segments. Um, so yeah, I've been spending money on getting this stuff out there and making stuff and spending time doing things that I'm not really very good at, like moving typography and 3D modeling and even drawing and painting. I used to like to think that I was pretty good at that, but it's been years since I've done it, and yeah, my skills have atrophied. So yeah, like I'm working on a book cover for the first part of Jerry and the Goddesses right now, and it's not coming out as good as I'd liked. I'm hoping I can salvage it, but yeah, if I can get some cash together to commission artwork for the covers and do things like advertising and stuff, that would make it a lot easier to get all this stuff out faster. And I mean, like possibly even one day, knock on wood, and don't get my hopes up too high. Pay for an editor to actually professionally edit it, because yeah, I'm not the world's greatest editor. So yeah, I will be posting a link to my Patreon if anybody wants to support me. I will have tiers starting at $5 a month, and yeah, so there we go. Okay, so let's move on to the questions. So the first question I got was extremely spoilery. I'm gonna save that one for last, and I'll let you guys know when I'm about to start answering it, and then when I'm done answering it. Because yeah, this is pretty spoilery for the story up to well beyond the part where I am on the reading uploads. So, reading uploads, we're just really getting started with the story. It's kind of a long one. The finished story is 250,000 words, and I'm actually expanding it because I'm splitting it up into a trilogy for publication. So, yeah, I'll be posting these for quite a while. So let's move on to the first question, non-spoilery question from NMC0123 that I got on Reddit, and he asks, or they ask, uh, where did the first idea for the world, its history, magic system, etc., come from? Was I just building off my first writing prompt post freeform, or something more planned out? So it's kind of in between that. I spend a lot of time pacing, smoking cigarettes, and thinking. Because, yeah, believe it or not, the guy who writes about introverts is a bit of an introvert. So I've had some ideas about like the magic system. I really like magic systems, like Vancian magic, which is used in Dungeons and Dragons and in novels by. Now I can't remember his first name. I think it's John Vance. Is that it? I could be wrong. I think I am wrong, but I read one of his books a long time ago, and I really liked the detail that he put into that. I also like other magic systems like Jim Butcher includes in the Dresden Files, where it's very much based on real world historical magic systems and rediscovered magic systems from like Druidism from the 60s up to Wiccan and modern paganism. A lot of the elements of that, I'm not trying to insult anyone who is a pagan, but a lot of the elements of that are reinvented based on supposition and some good scholarship, but they're not actually preserved. We don't have those traditions, and they were recreated for that. And I do like the way that was done. I really like the way Butcher did that. So I kind of, but at the same time, I'm kind of a newbie. I'm a baby author. I started writing in January of 2022, I think. And yeah, I published my first book in like March. And this was, I mean, like, sorry, I've been writing since I was 10 years old, but I've never gotten past like chapter 2 or 3 of anything book length. And I've written a couple of short stories, but yeah, I really finished my first book in like March of 2022. And I really wanted to give myself room to grow. So a lot of the magic in there is based on the needs of the plot, but I do, once I establish a rule, I try to stick with that rule. A lot of it was thought up as by riffing with some of you guys, actually, in the Discord. Yes, I'm talking about you, Acronymph. A lot of it was stuff that I thought up while pacing around smoking a cigarette. And yeah, I keep some notes, and try to be as consistent with what I've already done as possible. And when I need the rules to change, I spend a lot of time just agonizing over some excuse for them to change. Some of you will know what I'm referring to. Yeah, so let's move on to the next one, which is also by NMC0123 on Reddit. And they ask, what is my writing process like? Do I plan out whole books before starting, make rough plans for where the story should go, or something even less structured than that? So I use a mix of methods here. Some of the books, particularly the 2 spin-off stories, if you're just listening to these on TikTok or YouTube, you might not be aware, but there's 3 full-length books, and I mean full-length books. The third one is still in progress, but it's nearing the end. And there's 2 spin-offs, and the 2 spin-offs follow side characters from the main books. And those were pretty, I don't want to say meticulously, but they were pretty thoroughly planned out beforehand. And I stuck pretty close to my plans with those. For the larger, the main entry books, which, as I just mentioned, they're like, each one of them is like 250,000 words, and the third one is probably going to be even longer. That is more like I take down notes. Sometimes I have scenes that I'll just note down a bunch of scenes that I want to have happen. And sometimes I will note down plot points. I usually have some kind of plot points for the main books. I will have some notes on themes and stuff like that. And I will build around those. For the main books, it's very more free form. For the short stories, which I write, which are like 1 or 2 Reddit posts each, that's just me flying by the seat of my pants. Sometimes I'll go back and revise what I've already written in order to make something that I want to do later work better, but yeah, there's no real planning to those. I think up a title, and then I riff on that title. I did have some notes for one of them called Sookie and the Edgy Stan. But that was originally intended as one of the spin-off books, so about 50 to 60,000 words, and it ended up being about a 7,000 word short story. So a lot of that got dropped, and I just kind of winged it as best I could. So moving on to the next one, we've got Darkmen3100 from Reddit, who asked, what was your thought process when tackling the more controversial parts of your work, like all the rape, murder, the Taliban showing up, etc.? So I don't like writing rape scenes. I don't enjoy it. I don't like writing, like, I've never actually written a scene in which it happens, but I've written the scene where it's obvious it's going to happen. One of those has already been, I've already read and posted the video of that, and then I've also posted the video of me reading, where we get to see the aftermath of it. But I'm not going to write the scenes. I don't like actually doing that, but it's one of those things that I want to do because I want it to contribute to the overall story. Like, I want people to dislike the bad guys. I want people to hate the bad guys. If I can make you guys hate the bad guys, that's like a mission accomplished. That's a big good thing as far as I'm concerned. I want you to love the heroes and hate the villains. And as long as I can do that, then have a lot of freedom of what I can do with the plot. I don't have to follow a traditional three-act structure, even though I kind of do. I kind of keep that three acts in mind as I'm writing. Yeah, I have a lot more freedom by doing that. So a lot of that is really about characterization. Like the issue with the incident with Kathy that happens early on in Jerry and the Goddesses. That is something that I put in there because I wanted to show a bit of the process of Kathy coming to grips with that and moving past it and even building upon that to make herself a stronger person. Yeah, the Jerry and the Goddesses does definitely fit within the genre of what they call a progression fantasy. I think that's the term for it. Where we're seeing characters start out at a very low level of power, in a very loose sense of the word, and then reaching a very high level by the end of it. And that's not just Jerry. That's all of the characters, but in most of them, it's not really like apparent. In the case of like Inanna, she's already at an extremely high power level. But one thing people might have noticed is that her and Sarissa early on in the books are kind of holding themselves back, and that is something that comes up again and again in the stories, but there's reasons for that, and I kind of hint at those, although it's never really a major plot point. But the other characters, the human characters, Gary and Jerry and Kathy, and one of these days, you guys who've been only reading the stories will be introduced to Yarm, and Yarm is awesome. Yarm loves all who love Yarm. Yarm is great. There's a Church of Yarm later on. I want you to know that. So I won't say too much more about him for spoilery reasons. We'll move on to another one from Darkman3100 on Reddit, and said, also, were you in the Army, or do you just have a big fascination with guns? I was in the Army, but that's not really where most of the gun lore comes from. The gun lore mainly comes from me realizing that it's cool. It works well in fiction. Running around in a plate carrier and carrying an AR-15 in real life is kind of stupid. Especially if there's going to be people shooting back at you. Double, especially if you're not trained to do that, because yeah, that's stupid as hell. But in fiction, oh yeah. In fiction, that's good. That's good stuff. Shooting is exciting. And then yeah, there's magic guns too. Yeah, those of you who are just listening to the stories, you'll find out about the magic guns. Oh, there's generations of magic guns. Magic guns become a big thing, and it's a lot of fun. There's also an element of suspension of disbelief. I know some of my readers are active duty or veterans, and I want them to not read the scene and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe he did that." Every idiot does that. So, like, yeah, silencers don't make guns go pfft, because guns don't ever go pfft in real life. The quietest you'll hear is like a clack. A metallic clack is the action cycles. There are slide locks, though, that can make guns pretty damn quiet. Yeah, I also do shoot guns, and I own guns. So I have some knowledge, and Forgotten Weapons is one of my favorite YouTube channels. So moving on to Nick the Great. With both T's replaced with 7s. That's a good old school username right there on Reddit. Said, out of all the different parts, vignettes, and short stories, what do you think was your favorite to write? And if you can't choose just one, maybe top 3. Sookie and the Edgy Stand was a lot of fun to write. Sookie is a ton of fun to write. If she's not my favorite character to write, she's my second favorite character behind Jerry. A lot of you listening to the story won't know who Sookie is. She will come along later on, and she's a blast. I love Sookie to death. And if anything happened to her, I will kill all of you and then myself. She is freaking awesome. She is so much fun to write. So Sookie and the Edgy Stand was a lot of fun to write, which is now that I think about it. Probably sounds really sadistic to those of you who've read it. No, I just like Suki doing anything. I can write her doing anything. I just love writing her, even bad stuff. Um, the Out of all the different parts, vignettes, and shorter stories, Glinda and the Oracle, the first spinoff, that was a lot of fun to write because I was moving kind of outside my comfort zone, incorporating horror elements and using characters that I'd only very briefly established in the first book. Um, and that ended up being a lot of fun to write. Gary and the Old Holler Moonshine was a hell of a lot of fun to write because Gary and the Old Holler Moonshine. I mean, how can that not be fun to write? Man, going back to the mountains to visit his kin and discovering there's a conspiracy going on with people dying and shit needs getting done. Yeah, that's good stuff right there. There's one that I posted called Joey and the Christmas Miracle. That was a lot of fun to write too. I don't know. I don't even think I can do a top three because now I'm thinking about Jerry and the Agency, which was one of the first vignettes that I wrote. Might have been the very first vignette that I wrote. I love that because I gave Jerry a chance to actually look someone in the eye and make a physical threat of violence to that person, which is not something Jerry would do lightly. That was a lot of fun, taking Jerry out of his comfort zone and putting him to the point where he's got to put his foot down. Yeah, I don't even think I could do a top three. I might be able to do a top 10. There's 22 short stories, so yeah, I can maybe do a top 10. Sorry, I can't really give you a good answer to that one. So, another one from Nick the Great on Reddit. I'm also curious, have you ever written part of the story and later wished you had chosen a different way for events to play out? If so, what are some of the changes you would make if you could? Um, so like Jerry and the Goddesses and the sequel, Jerry and the Tradecraft, both of those I wish I had paid more attention to the structure with the foreknowledge that I was going to turn each of those into a trilogy for publication. I could have saved myself a lot of the effort that I'm putting in now to turn each third of those into a complete story in and of itself. But at the same time, I had also promised that I would be massively expanding, making major expansions to the story and for publishing, so that it would be worth it for people who've read it online already for free to go out and pay to get a copy of the book when I put it on Amazon or make it available for ordering paperbacks or ebooks. I wanted to make it worth people's while if they're going to spend the money on it to get it again. So I, said I would do that, but now that I'm doing it, I'm realizing it's a lot of hard work because I have to keep the story more or less the same, and it's got to remain a coherent whole. But at the same time, I've got to get the kind of cycle and the three-act structure that I want to use onto each third of it. Jerry and the Goddesses provided me a great spot for the first one, not so great for the second one, and then a pretty good one for the third. But it's going to be where like you can't read the second book of the trilogy without having read the first one. There's nothing I can do about that because they were originally written as one story. Jerry and the Tradecraft, I'm having some issues picking out where each one will start and stop because of that. But I'm thinking of ways of expanding that story to make natural stopping points and stuff. So yeah, that's something I do wish I'd gone back. I'd altered the stories for that point. As far as plot elements, no, not really. I'm pretty happy with the plot that is laid out, at least in an overall sense. So, got to get that tea. So, the next one is from another Edward. Hey, Ed. Ed's my buddy in Discord, so just so you know. He asked this on Reddit. He said, through both Jerry's story and the operational books, you've written about various dynamics between characters, as well as experiences that your characters go through. Is there a specific type of relationship or experience you would like to write about in the future? So yeah. Basically every kind of relationship there is, I would like to write about at some point. As far as stuff that I'm specifically interested in writing, I want to write uh, meet cute. I don't know. That's not the term. I want to write two characters falling in love. I did that in Jerry and the Goddesses. Jerry and Anana are, even by the time that I'm posting, by the point of the latest video post, Jerry and Anana are very much in love. They're just getting comfortable telling each other, kind of, with Anana's admission in the hotel in I think it was part 17 or 18. But yeah, they are in love, and that just kind of swam under the radar. I've been expanding it out a bit for the published books, but it's kind of like the way it was done. It's kind of stuck underneath the radar, and I want to do like a straight up romance. And I know that sounds weird, especially looking at me and knowing what I've written about before. And yeah, so I want to write two characters falling in love. I've got a couple of different ways of characters forming relationships under my belt now. I don't have two characters meeting, liking each other, getting to know each other, and realizing that they are that attracted to each other, and then realizing that they are in love. I wanted to do that with one of my books that I've been working on called Eater of Snakes. But that ended up, that came out bad. I did that and I ended up making the main character look like a freaking incel. And I ended up objectifying the love interest, even though like she's a fully fleshed out character, but she's still like, you read it and she seems objectified as hell. And the main character came across like a straight up incel because the main character is a bitter, angry person, and for very good reasons. But when I put that into a romance, no, it did not work. So that is going by the wayside. I do have an idea for characters that might happen to in the future. I have one book that I've written and am in the process of editing called Sanctuary, the Engineer, because it's part of a series. It is a post-apocalyptic, kind of a zombie apocalypse thing. There are two characters in that whom I very specifically want to introduce, and I could definitely do a romance between those two. Again, there's a very bitter, angry character, but he's also a bitter, angry character who doesn't show his bitterness and anger very much. So it'll work. I'm hoping it'll work a lot better there. So, next question from another Edward on Reddit. Do you have any urban fantasy stories you would recommend reading? Yes. The Dresden Files. There's like 20 of them right now. They're by Jim Butcher. Harry Dresden. There was a TV show based on the first couple of books a while back that really took a lot of liberties with the universe, but it was still an enjoyable show. Um, I would recommend that. Would recommend that one because I really liked it. I really enjoy those books, and I look forward to the next one coming out. I've read all of them so far. I've read most of the short stories, but not all of them that Butcher has written. As for other urban fantasy, I can't because that's Dresden Files is really the only urban fantasy I ever read. I never thought of myself as an urban fantasy writer. I do like fantasy. I like high fantasy. But I never really pictured myself writing urban fantasy until Jerry and the Goddesses came along. So, oh, and the operational books that I mentioned in the last question, if you go to my Amazon author page, you can find those there. They are military science fiction. They have obviously a lot of similarities in tone and prose and writing style to Jerry and the Goddesses, but they're not as filthy. They're not. Jerry and the Goddesses is like rated X, and Operational Realities would maybe be rated R. Yeah, I think rated R. There's some pretty dark stuff that happens in them, but yeah, there's more dark stuff coming too if you're reading them. Yes, I turn beet red when I laugh. It's just who I am. Welcome to being a ginger. Okay, so another Edward again. He had four of them, so there's still another one after this. asked, without getting too political in the current Western climate, some people seem to assume that if you write about a subject, you must somehow be glorifying it. How do you maintain the courage to still write about things that are ugly, horrible, and very dark and real? That's actually a really easy answer, and that answer is I condemn them. I condemn those things. I make bad characters do them, and I try to make sure that the characters who do those things get their just desserts karmically as a result of doing those things. Um, so yeah, those of you who are watching the videos, Nick's got his fate set up, carved out for him already. Those of you reading the stories will know where Nick is at current, and they will know about another character who is one of the voices in Nick's mind that has been mentioned before but has not yet played a big role. He will come more into the forefront later on. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be either one of them. This late at this point in the game, I wouldn't want to be either one of them. Um, so yeah. So let's see the last question from another Edward. Do you have any world building tips that have helped flesh out your world? Yeah, actually, I got a bunch of world building tips. I could probably make an hour-long video of world building tips. Um, my first world building tip is, yeah, the worlds are about the characters. If you just heard a sound and saw me look away, that was Edward himself sending me a message on Discord. Uh, so, hi, Ed. Hi again, Ed. I'll answer your question when I'm done with this video. Well, the question you asked on Discord, or the comment you made on Discord. So more world building tips. First, it's about the characters, which means it's about the people. So yeah, figure out your main characters and your plot first, and then work off of that, because that's gonna make the world. That's gonna make everything a lot more coherent. So like, if you have a quest about a warrior who cannot die, who's seeking to atone for some sin from the past. Well, a Japanese-inspired, feudal Japan-inspired setting would work well with that. An Old West setting, yeah, that would work pretty well with that too. A I don't know, like there's some setting I can't think of what setting that wouldn't work in, but I'm sure there is one. But like you can let the plot and the characters inspire you as to what exactly kind of world you want. Another thing is, and this is going to sound kind of cheap, but give your world a gimmick. It's okay to use gimmicks. All the tropes and cliches and stuff, they exist for a reason. It is perfectly fine to use them. You're not selling out by using tropes or gimmicks. Give your world a gimmick. George R. R. Martin made a world where the seasons have nothing to do with with the years. You know, the seasons come when they feel like coming, and that was a great gimmick for that world, especially given the plot that he had with the White Walkers and all that. Um, Jim Butcher's world is very much built up off of Dresden himself. Like, so, you know, you start with, like, so there's a wizard in the phone book. Seems to be like the starting point of the Dresden Files. So where did he learn to be a wizard? Oh, he learned from another wizard who, and what does being a wizard mean? Well, there's this thing called a White Council, and yeah, you can just start with the character, and you can spread out from there to build the world. And one of the advantages of this is that it's kind of more free. You can be more flexible with it by doing it that way, and the world is going to suit your characters because it's built based off of them. And then, yeah, I just segued from one tip right back into the original one. But yeah, gimmicks. Butcher's gimmick was that you know, witchcraft and magic, real world magic, worked. It really worked. We just don't know about it because, you know, the whole masquerade thing. They keep it a secret world. I'm sure there's a trope for that. I don't remember what the name is. If you've never been on TV Tropes, go there now. That's good advice for any writer or anything. Learn those tropes. Another tip for world building is when you don't know what to put between to fill in the gaps, just look at the real world. You can't go wrong by using the real world. The real world is a very interesting place. There are a ton of interesting events that have happened throughout history, interesting people that have lived or are currently living, interesting places to go, interesting coincidences that have happened. Yeah, you can always look to the real world, and by using a lot of real world elements, your world will feel more real because it is more real. So yeah, that would be those would be like the top couple of world building tips I have. Also, when you draw your map, rivers do not flow from ocean to ocean. They flow from mountain to ocean or from lake to ocean. Don't draw ocean to ocean rivers. I see those a lot of all the time in fantasy maps, and they bug me. Okay, so RJJ 456 on Reddit wrote, "Roses are red, violets are blue. Can Jerry write a poem as well as I do?" No. No. Jerry would refuse to do that. Jerry would get embarrassed at the thought of reading a poem out loud in front of people and refuse to do it. But if he did, it would probably be something like, "Roses are red. My wife is at home. Won't you please just leave me alone?" Okay, so moving on, we've got Night Dragon Slayer from TikTok, who asked, "How did you come up with the idea for Jerry and the Goddesses?" Okay, so I've told this story before, but I will happily tell it again. Get your milk and cookies. This is a story. Okay, so it started with, there was a prompt posted to a subforum on Reddit called a subreddit. Uh, the name of that subreddit was writing prompts, and one of the things that they do in writing prompts is somebody will post a prompt, and then people will comment to that with a story based on that prompt. So this particular one struck me as a little amusing because the prompt was something to the effect of, "You have accidentally summoned an ancient, long-forgotten goddess, and she shows up in your room in the middle of the night, eager to please her first worshiper in centuries." And so I popped in there, and I found the auto mod comment that comes automatically, and I replied to that because that's the place where you can chit chat. All top level comments need to be stories. So I responded to that. I'm like, this is either going to get real thirsty or real wholesome. And somebody responded back to me and was like, "I'd like to see the wholesome one." And then I got upvoted a lot. I don't know that it was really all that much, but it was enough to really catch my attention and notice that my comment had tweaked somebody's interest. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'm going to try and split the difference between dirty and wholesome. Or between wholesome and wholesome, if you understand what I'm getting at there. So I wrote a part, and the part was premised on a joke, and that was that the goddess was entirely asexual. And she just doesn't do it. She has no interest in it, and so she doesn't even make her body capable of doing it. And the main character was also going to be like, "No, I'm fine with not doing it. I care more about other things." So naturally, I had to make him a big nerd, like a classical nerd. You know, no friends, no social skills, just academic success and strong interests in, pop culture things like Dungeons and Dragons and what have you. Jerry's a big Star Wars fan, in this case. I'm a Star Trek guy, just so we're clear. I love Star Wars, but, I mean, come on, Star Trek is awesome. Everything Star Trek is awesome. All you people hating on New Trek can go pound sand. So, yeah, so I combined those two characters, like a goddess-type character who was just completely asexual, and this geeky, nerdy, awkward guy who was not, I mean, like, he would love to hop in bed with a woman, but he'd be too scared to do it right away. And bringing those two together to make a good joke. And, well, what happened was that became the top comment in the thread, and I think I beat the next highest guy by like twice as many upvotes, and people were immediately clamoring for part two. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, I can do part two. So I did part two, and in order to keep with the theme, I ended that one on another joke, suggesting that Jerry was spent a lot of time shaking hands with Molly, if you know what I mean. Um, I mean, he jerks off a lot, like a whole lot, like a funny amount. He's a nerdy guy. It makes sense. So yeah, and going in that direction, there were certain expectations coming up, and I didn't want to defy those expectations, but I also didn't want to just start writing smut. And my wife was encouraging me to go ahead and just start writing smut. And but I got the impression that a lot of the people that were really liking it were enjoying the fact that I wasn't immediately going to smut. So I tried to keep going in that direction when people kept calling for more. Only I had established that there's at least one other goddess out there named Inanna, and she is at least partially the goddess of sex, and that is a real world thing. There is a real world mythological goddess named Inanna, a Persian deity, and sex is part of her domain. Um, in the real world, it's a lot more complicated and fuzzy. I kind of tighten things up a little bit, but I like that fuzziness, so that's another feature of the story. And I brought Inanna in as another character in the third part when people kept, I mean, like, when I commented saying something to the effect of, I can't write a third part because then I would just go smutty with it and it would be ridiculous and people would be making fun of me for it. Would go viral and people would be making fun of me for ages. And people were like, we don't care. Give us a third part. So I'm like, fine. You know what? Who am I to deny the will of the reader? So I wrote a third part, and I ended that third part, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and set the expectations now. Smut happens in the world, but you don't get to read it. It happens between scenes, between written scenes. So that one literally ended with Inanna jumping on Jerry and having her way with him, which he was fine with. I want to make that clear. He was always consenting, even when he was really freaked out. So that all of the parts just kept getting more and more attention, and I posted the first three parts on the writing prompts thread, and they just kept getting more and more attention, and people wanted to talk about this world that I was starting to build and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I'll move this to my profile and I'll start posting stuff regularly. And I think I got through like part 7 on my profile, and then I realized this is not going to work. I need another space. So I created the subreddit, R Jerry and the Goddesses, and I started posting parts there. I think that was around part 7. It might have been later. I know it was prior to part 13. And I just kept posting parts there, and that was it. So yeah, somebody posting a thirsty writing prompt is based, and me responding to it by kind of making fun of the fact that it was a thirsty writing prompt is how Jerry and the Goddesses got started. Okay, let's see. So another one from Night Dragon Slayer. Do you have other stories you plan to post on here after you finish this story? Okay, so Jerry and the Goddesses has 98 parts, I believe. Maybe 99. It's 98 or 99. I was aiming for 100 parts. Um, Most of the parts from this point forward are going to take me longer than 10 minutes to read, so they'll be posted in multiple parts on TikTok. I will post those multiple parts all at the same time, though. So if you get cut off in the middle of a part, you'll be able to. And I do end the parts on, like, logical stopping points, so you'll know if the part is over or if you just need to go to my profile and find the next part. So yeah, these are like parts. But I'm sorry, that's just the way I have to do it because of TikTok's limitations. Yeah, Jerry and the Goddesses, the story Jerry and the Goddesses has I think 98 parts, and then there's a handful of short stories, which are each about the length of one part of Jerry and the Goddesses. Um, and then after that, there is a spinoff that I'm going to do called Glinda and the Oracle, which has a number of people have compared tonally to the TV show Supernatural. Which it does kind of have a kind of a Monster of the Week feel, even though it's a kind of standalone story. But it's a small town being hunted by a monster, and Glinda, who is a character who will be introduced in Jerry and the Goddesses, has to decide whether or not she wants to be a hero or wants to continue to be what she was before that. After that, there's a few more short stories. I don't I don't recall what order they were in. I'd have to pull it up to find it, but it doesn't matter. There's a few more short stories after that, and then there will be Jerry and the Tradecraft, which is the sequel to Jerry and the Goddesses, and is like a true sequel. It's based on, very much on events that happened in Jerry and the Goddesses. It picks up where Jerry and the Goddesses left off. Literally, the very last scene of Jerry and the Goddesses is the first scene of Jerry and the Tradecraft. Um, so then that will go on for that is only 60 something parts, but it has the same word count, so the parts are even longer in that one than they are in Jerry and the Goddesses. So yeah, the word count is about the same for both of them, and in both it's like 250,000 words. But I promise you, pacing is one thing that I am willing to admit that I am good at. So I promise you that they're not going to get too drony at any point. I know how pacing works, and I understand the principles, and I seem to be good at it because people seem to have no complaints whatsoever about my pacing. Nobody's ever said anything about it, and a couple of people have praised my pacing. And in fact, the usual response to me saying that this story was 250,000 words is no way it's that long. So yeah, don't be dissuaded by that length. But yeah, it's Jerry and the Tradecraft is about the same length as Jerry and the Goddesses. And then there are more vignettes, more short stories. I keep calling them vignettes. They're not really vignettes. Some of them are. Joey and the Christmas Miracle. That is a vignette. That is like 10 minutes in Jerry's life. The most of the others are not really vignettes. They're short stories. Uh, but they're short stories about less important things for the most part. They're about the daily lives of the characters more as much as they are like exciting stories in their own right. Some of them are pretty exciting. Kathy and the Great Big Ball is one that has a nice action scene in there. And then after that comes Gary and the Old Holler Moonshine, which is a spinoff that stars Gary. And as I mentioned earlier, that was a lot of fun to write. I was looking up, I'm not Appalachian. I'm not from the Appalachians. I have some family in the Appalachians, but most of my family is really from the deep South, the deep South. We're talking Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, places like that. Um, so I was looking up. I admit Gary is from Kentucky. For those of you who don't know, he is from a small town called Hogs Hollow, which is fictional, by the way. So don't go bother looking it up. I do have files for Google Earth. I do have files that point out the spots where I find these because I use Google Earth a lot in my research for writing. So there is a pin in Google Earth where Hogs Hollow should be. There's not really anything there, though. I think there's like one farmhouse and maybe a church there. Yeah, I looked up a lot of Appalachian stuff because the idea of like the clan structure being alive in Appalachia was fascinating to me. I did find out that no, it's really not. It's not. It shows up in fiction sometimes. In real life, there's not really that much of a clan structure in Appalachia, especially Kentucky. I couldn't find anything really about it, but I went ahead and included it because I'm writing fiction. So there is a Johnson clan that Gary is a part of, and that includes people with the surname Johnson and also a couple other surnames. And that was fun. That was something I really wanted to do, so that Gary could really have this broad, diverse family um, to get into. And then after that, there's more shorts, and the shorts that happened after that were really because I knew that the third book was going to be the end of a trilogy. So the third book was going to be truly epic, and it really is pretty epic in scope. So a lot of the short stories following Gary and the Old Holler Moonshine are building up to that, and including some of the last short stories I wrote before the final book are literally like a prelude to the final book. One of them in particular, I think it's called Marty and the Welfare Check. And yeah, I'm sure you've noticed the naming pattern so far. It's always character and the blank. I'm going to stick to that. That's going to be a shtick. Shticks are cool. I like shticks. So yeah, and then the third book in the trilogy is Jerry and the Apocalypse. And Jerry and the Apocalypse is apocalyptic. Earth is having meteors slamming into it, and earthquakes happening, and there's a group of ancient primordial beings trying to take over the world so they can kill all life. And there's a dead world that nobody knows what happened to. Yeah, it's freaking epic. There's an army of the gods, and there's clashes between the gods and humans, and yeah, it's big. It's going to be longer than the others. So yeah, I've got like, if I do one part every other day, which is about the pace I've been keeping up, it's going to be a couple of years before we even catch up to the current point. So I'll keep posting these. I'm hoping one day I'll be able to sit down and just for like 12 hours straight record parts and periodically do that and get them all edited and worked together, and then I can post them as I need them, and I can speed up the rate of posting, but I don't know. They're actually, there's a little bit of work involved, so I can't really do that so far. So, okay, so that answers that question. So, Night Dragon Slayer also asked, did you do research to make the gods and goddesses? Yes. There's two methods of coming up with the gods that I use. The first is to take an existing god and to tweak them and alter them with the idea that the passage of time has corrupted our modern understanding of this ancient deity, such that it resembles the real life counterpart. But the truth is the version that you see of them in the book. So, like, here's an example from the current book, Loki. Loki is a character in the current book, not the Marvel Cinematic Universe Loki, the Norse Loki, who is the half-something son of Odin, a half giant son of Odin, or sorry, not half giant. He's a giant. He was a giant that Odin adopted. I don't know why I thought he was a half giant. This is a stupid MCU creeping into my brain. Yeah, he's a character in Jerry and the Tradecraft and in a couple of kind of related vignettes or short stories. He's not like how he appears in the legends, and in modern versions of Loki. He's not the MCU Loki. He's not this. He's not a god of trickery or deceit. He's a god of hearths and cooking fires, because that was the most ancient, like, sort of association Loki had. He wasn't even considered a god back in the earliest days, I don't think. He was considered more like a mischievous spirit, and Loki was probably just the name of one particular instance of that, because Loki is an actual name. Whereas like Thor, it was a word, and people named Thor named after the god. But Loki was an existing name. So Loki was probably a particular, like a brownie or elf type of character that they wrote stories about, and then he got elevated over time. But he was always associated with, in the earliest days at least, associated with hearths and cooking fires in a kind of a loose way. So we're not really 100% sure. That we know very little about Norse mythology, contrary to popular belief. So, yeah, I took what little we did know, and I took one of the possible possibly more accurate routes, and I went that way with him, and I made the trickery and the troublemaking more part of his character than part of his domain. And um, yeah, like I had told people before that if I was going to do Loki, he would be this big badass biker who was just kind of an asshole. Because that's like his portrayal. Like he calls people out and gets into fistfights with people. He's not like a weenie like in the MCU universe. Sorry, Tom Hiddleston. I don't blame you for that. It's just the way your character was written. But yeah, he's not a weenie. He's a tough guy. He's a giant. I mean, of course he's tough. But like that doesn't really come across in modern incarnations of him very much. I didn't really lean on that with mine, but we're gonna see him actually get into a fight, and he'll carry his own weight. He's not a pushover. He'll be the first to tell you he's a lover, not a fighter, and that's actually a line from one of the parts. But he can handle himself in a fight. He's a god, so he's not a weenie. But yeah, he's not really like the Loki I have is not really a whole lot like any modern understanding of Loki, but it is based on actual research. That's the first method of making gods. Inanna was done that way as well. Those of you who look up Inanna, you'll see that there's a bunch of domains: fertility, justice. Even early on, I was saying she had the domain of beauty, but canonically, she has the domains of sex, love, and war. Um, and I kind of explain how the domains work later on as we get through the stories. But like that was kind of the way Inanna was. I started with the initial conception, and I love the idea of Inanna in the underworld with Inanna and Demuzid. I think that's how you say his name. And Inanna in the underworld. Those were very interesting old myths, and I kind of use those to influence, but not like dictate her backstory and her character and stuff. So, yeah. The other way is the Sarissa way, where I started with an idea, learning, and I looked up gods or goddesses that shared that domain, that had that in their domain, and I kind of used one of those sketchy Proto-Indo-European translators to get back to a very ancient language form, and I used one of those and to just pull up a bunch of Proto-Indo-European words and compared them to modern words and came up with kind of like a heuristic of modern English words, I should say, because I worked with English just because I could, although I could have done this with any modern language descended from PIE. But to just see how the words have changed over time, and then I would start with something and kind of follow those rules backwards to get to a name. Like I would start with something like the in the case of Sarissa, I started with the name of a Hindu goddess that had learning in her portfolio. I can't remember her name. It's one of the more well-known Hindu goddesses. But yeah, I can't remember her name. But I kind of worked it through that, and I came up with this sound that sounded like a name, Sarissa. And so yeah, I used that as her name, and then like I had this rule that the gods' personalities and their domains do not need to match up. They might match up. In the case of one goddess, Ishanti, she's goddess of beauty. Yeah, she can be vain and a little self-important, which are qualities that we often associate with beautiful people. But that's not the extent of her character. And like Inanna, yeah, Inanna has a libido the size of a freaking skyscraper. But she's also kind of how do I put it? I don't want to say childlike, but there's a certain innocence to her that doesn't make sense for someone who is the goddess of sex and war. And okay, maybe it kind of makes sense for a goddess of love, but like, sex and war, and she definitely does like her war domain as much as she likes the others. So that was one of the big rules, is that the personalities and the domains do not need to match up. The domains do not need to influence the personalities for the younger gods, because there are older gods as well. I think the introduction of Ixlablatl touched on that a little bit, but we'll learn more about that later on. As far as the readings go, if you're actually reading the stories on Reddit, you know all about this at this point. Yeah. So the older gods, I definitely did want to make their domains reflect more in their personalities, because they would have taken domains based on their personalities, whereas with the younger gods, the domains, there would have been a little bit of an arbitrariness to how they were handed out. And there was like a collective decision on who got what domains. So, yeah. But yeah, I do a lot of research into mythology to make the gods and goddesses. I don't generally stick to real world scholarship for it. In fact, I generally try to stay away from real world scholarship. At one point, I was even saying that I regretted basing Inanna off of a real historical goddess. I regret it less now that I've established her and I know her in my head, and she's not the historical goddess anymore. But yeah, I don't want to use all the historical deities. I want to be inspired by them. Hold on one second. All right, so let's see. This is an hour long already. So Night Dragon Slayer's last question, and we're getting to the end here. There's only two more questions, not including this one. His last question, Night Dragon Slayer's last question, was, on a scale of 1 to 100, how badass is Gary? Well, that kind of depends on when we are meeting him. So, Night Dragon Slayer asked this question on TikTok, where on TikTok I think I'm only up to part 23 or 24. I think I did 24. I'm not sure. It's 23 or 24 right now. We're just getting started with the second act, which is going to be a long, long second act. But it will have multiple highs and lows. So, at that point, I would say Gary's probably about like a 90, 92, maybe an 88 on his worst day. He's about as badass as you can get, way more badass than anyone you'd have a chance of meeting, but not necessarily the most badass of them all. At another point, Gary's going to hit a solid 101, and yes, I know, 101. Trust me, he's going to be more badass than anybody has any right to at a certain point here. The story's not really about his growth as a character. Gary is very much a static character, because I'll tell you the truth, Gary is kind of my author insert. Gary's the one who says the things that I'm thinking most of the time, and who views things the way I view things most of the time. Yeah, so Gary is kind of my author insert, which means he doesn't get a lot of development throughout the series. I may have another spin-off with him, starring him, in which I can do something, but I think I like him the way he is, and he's a likable guy the way he is, and a cool badass the way he is. I don't see a lot of character flaws that need to be changed in him. He's also an older guy. A lot of people were surprised to hear this, but my conception of Jerry is, Gary, when we first meet him, he's in his late 50s at the youngest. He could be in his 60s by that. No, I think he's in his late 50s. I actually have his birth year written down somewhere. And yeah, in case you hadn't caught on, the series is set in the very near future, in the late 2020s and early 2030s. So, yeah, Gary is very badass. He's not the most badass character of all time. He might be the most badass character in the books. Those of you who are further along in the series might wonder if I'm kind of dismissing Yarm a little bit. No, Yarm is consummate badass, but Gary fights to win. I'll just put it that way. Gary fights to win, and he's very good at winning. Him and Yarm would be an epic battle. In one alternate future, Gary and Jerry come to a head, and Jerry needs the combined military might of Earth to finally beat Gary's ragtag tiny band of resistance fighters. This is an alternate reality, not something that actually happens in the story. but it's a vision that Jerry has of a possible future. And yeah, even Jerry needs the combined armies of Earth to take out Gary and a bunch of randos who Gary found and handed guns to. So that's how badass Gary is. He's really badass. Okay, so moving on. The second to last question here is from Heather on Twitter, who I am convinced only asked a question to be nice, and I still appreciate it. Is how do I choose character names? The most succinct answer is wild flailing. The longer answer is I just sit there and I think up a name, and then I immediately discard it because it's a name that I've already thought up and used for another character. So then I think up another name, and then I discard that, and then I start saying, okay, I want their name to start with this letter. Yes, I think I do want. No, I want a different letter. I'm going to go with a different letter. So let me think of all the names that start with this letter, and I will then think of about 5 names that I've already used. Then I'll discard all of those, and then I'll go look up something that will help me, and I will find something like if they have a ethnicity, I will punch that in, ethnicity, names, and search that on Google, and I'll pull up a list, and I'll kind of scroll around randomly and then pick the first or fourth thing on the list and be like, okay, that's their name. Yep. So yeah, like I said, wild flailing. Picking names is hard, and I'm not very good at it. So, okay. So, getting to the last question here, and as I said before, if you remember that long ago, this is a spoilery question. So this question came from Nix on Reddit, and bear with me one second here. Somebody was trying to ask a last minute question, and no, I just wanted to give them a chance to get it in, but yeah, apparently they're passed out from what someone else said. So we'll get to the very last question here. This question was asked by Nix on Discord, and so I'm going to give you a moment right now. If you don't want to hear spoilers for the end of Jerry and the Goddesses, and this is a big spoiler, stop playing the video now. When you see me give the screen 2 thumbs up like this, you'll know that it's safe to start listening again. So, turn down your audio, scrub through. I think if you're on the PC, you can scrub through the videos until you see me give that thumbs up, or you're going to get spoiled real hard. This is a big spoiler, and so, use my ranting about it and my going off on a wild tangent about how spoilery this is as enough time to get your volume turned down. So, here we go. Nix asked, when did you know that Sarissa was going to become the antagonist of the story? In which part? So, I can't say that I knew this, but I first conceived of this as I was writing the part introducing Nick and Asteram. So that's part 13. I did time it so that 13 would be when I introduced the villains. That was deliberate. I hope somebody noticed. It was when I was writing that part, and shortly after writing that part, that I was thinking, Asteram has kind of a cartoon villain quality already in that part, and I didn't want to lose that cartoon villain quality, but I also wanted an enemy that would be a pants-shittingly terrifying enemy. And we had already established, mostly not in the text, but in conversations, in the comments on the parts and in Discord, that Sarissa is, based on her domain, phenomenally powerful, like incredibly powerful. Because when she's smart, she's a genius. She's like a pure genius. She's probably smarter than Jerry, and Jerry's the smartest guy in the series. But Sarissa's probably the only one smarter than him. But she is definitely smarter than him. She's just ridiculously smart. And on top of that, she knows everything that every human being will ever know. And yeah, I used the future sense there. She knows everything that everybody will ever know, which means she knows things from every possible future.
and she knows everything that everyone ever knew in the past, and everything that everybody does. Almost everything you do is based on knowledge. You are using a mouse. Wiggling my mouse here. You can't see it, but I am. That's because you know how a mouse works. You know how a mouse works. You There's knowledge being exercised there, and it is the exercise of a god's domain that feeds them power, not worship. That was one of the rules of my magic system, is that it is not worship that powers the gods, but the use of things, the activities in their domain. So every time you wiggle a mouse, you're giving her a little bit of power. Every time you pick up your phone, every time you shut off your alarm clock, every time you drive to work, every time you put your clothes on, there's a little bit of knowledge involved in almost everything you do. And so everything everyone does is feeding her a little bit of power. So she's got tons of power, even compared to the other gods. So she is just overwhelmingly powerful. And that was something that we spoke about a lot. Me talking about it, like I said, in comments and in the Discord. And so as I wrote the part with Nick and Asteram, I was thinking, okay, so I've got some villains in there now, and I still had not sketched out the full plot. I was like, what would make something truly scary? And it occurred to me that one of the things that I could do is I could have someone that we all thought was a good guy turn bad, and I'm literally, this is a me having a cigarette at work, pacing around behind the building, thinking about this stuff. And my first thought was, well, Gary's pretty fucking scary. What if Gary went bad? If Gary went bad, that would be really scary. But at the same time, Inanna and Sarissa against Gary, Gary's consummate badass. But I mean, you're talking two goddesses versus an old dude with a gun. That's not really a good one. So I figured one of the goddesses has to go bad. So I thought about having Inanna go bad, and I was like, no, that's not going to work. No, I want Jerry to have um, a relationship with her. I want to turn that. I was in the process of converting that relationship that he has with her into something more wholesome and less kind of rapey. I know it has that feeling. It's not. Jerry consents to everything, but you know, he sometimes wonders if he should or not. So I wanted Jerry and Inanna to form a stable relationship. I do like writing stable relationships, not necessarily romantic ones, but I like writing stable, firm relationships because I haven't had a whole lot of those. I have had some, obviously. Um, so I really like those. So then I looked at Sarissa and I'm like, Sarissa was his BFF, and I didn't really want to make her bad. But I was like, that would be an amazing plot twist. So I noted it down, and I ended up writing two outlines. Um, One of the outlines is going to have Asteram basically reveal that he's a lot smarter than they have been giving him credit for. Because he kind of comes across as a dumbass sometimes, and he kind of is. He is a dumbass, and not nothing kind of about it. Um, and yeah, I was going to have kind of a reveal where they find out that he's been doing some stuff behind the scenes that they were not aware of that has made him way more dangerous than they originally realized he was. And thinking about ideas for that, I never really nailed down the particulars. I kind of had these two tracks that we could go down, and the plot line was basically the same, except I would drop hints here or there to one of them. And then I started going and writing, putting off the decision of which kind of plot twist would happen at the end until later. And then I realized I kept dropping hints that Sarissa was bad. Just those were the ones that really spoke to me. So those were the ones that ended up getting dropped into the story. And so Sarissa does a couple of things that are out of character for her. One of them happens even before that. Um, she literally seduces Jerry when she knows Jerry's in a relationship with Inanna, and that Inanna would be upset about it. Which, if you think about it, is wildly out of character for her but she kind of plays it off like it was a thing, just something. She just wanted to know what it was like, and she didn't really think Inanna would get that upset and blah blah blah. Uh, but like, I explained it in the story, but that's not a very satisfying explanation. And the fact that it was not a very satisfying explanation is kind of a plot hole, uh, unless she were to reveal that she went bad at the end. I'm not going to go into the details about it, but yeah. And so I kept going and going and going and going, and it was probably so. Like I said, I came up with this idea around part 13, and it was probably around the 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 70s. So like I think the 70s is about when they're uh, moving through the spirit world on their way to Asgard, or perhaps when they're in Asgard. But it was around there that I realized that yeah, I definitely need to go with the Sarissa turning one, which kind of sucks because I'd already named the Discord bot Sarissa bot. Now that there's a bad guy managing the Discord for me, but it is what it is. So it was around the 70s, the late 60s or 70s, around the time that we got to meet Gary's long lost love, Chris. It was around there that I decided, yeah, Sarissa has to be the villain. So that's the path that I'm going on. And although honestly, I was already kind of committed to it by that point, but that was when I realized it. And yeah, so it was kind of early on that I knew it was a possibility, but it wasn't until like much later in the story that I realized that is the possibility I will be taking. And at that point, writing it out, and especially writing it out, the scene when when Jerry is first told that Inanna is not being entirely honest with him, and the reactions I got from that part, yeah, the, yeah, I love those. Those were great, and yeah, to that I say 2 thumbs up. We're all done with the spoilers now. So that was pretty much it. You probably just noticed that cut. That's because I did, in fact, forget a question, which I knew was going to happen. And that question was, sorry, I've got it on my phone here. This was NMC0123 asking on Reddit. One more I thought of since the original post. What inspired the couple of parts that had soundtrack/background music suggestions for the reader? Always like those, so I'll ask if you plan to have more of them. Thanks. Well, I think the first one I did was in Jerry and the Goddesses, and it was a part where that ends with Yarm telling one of the bad guys, Nick, actually tells Yarm that he's going to hurt Yarm, and Yarm reacts pretty much the way Yarm should react, in that he throws his head back and laughs and says, "Oh, this is not going to end the way you think, Cupcake." Yeah, I was hearing the song "The Only Thing They Fear Is You" by Mick Gordon from the Doom Eternal soundtrack as I wrote that, and I just picture that song kicking in right when that happened. The next part I remember doing that with was a part in Jerry and the Tradecraft, and mild spoiler warnings, but it's not going to be too bad, where Jerry is basically set up a little sex cult in Paris because he's lost his memories. And I am showing him as he is with his memory lost, and he just has this flock of women who are following him around and sleeping with him. And I could not hear "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees as I was writing that part, so I posted that there. And then there was another song that I remembered from my teen years. I think it was called "Revolving Door" by I don't even remember the name of the band now, but it was like a song. It was one of those kind of not rap rock, but like rap adult contemporary. I don't even know how to call it, rap pop songs that was popular at the time that got played on alternative rock radio. Um, and yeah, it was just the singer bragging about how many women he slept with, and yeah, it seemed kind of appropriate. It is a kind of a catchy song. Um, yeah, that was that. And then I had originally misinterpreted this question as being about the incidental music that oh, there was another one, and that was a song that happens during a rather sad part. I'm not going to spoiler it by telling you what happens in that part. You'll just have to get that far, read that far, or keep listening, and eventually we'll get there. Uh, and someone, I think Parrot2, posted in the Discord that this certain song that they had heard really fit the mood of that part really well. And I listened to it and I was like, oh, yes, it does. That is exactly what I was aiming for. I'm so glad that you did that. So I went back and edited the part and added that. Listen to this song as you're on repeat as you're reading this part. Because it just fit the mood perfectly. But yeah, as I was saying, I originally misinterpreted this question as being about the incidental music. So the incidental music that I'm using in the readings. And yeah, I just wanted to make the readings more interesting because I know sitting here staring at me talking at the computer while not even making eye contact. Here we go. Here we go. Eye contact. I know I'm supposed to be doing this all the time. Maybe not staring so creepily at the camera, but you know, I should be making eye contact with the camera. I should be looking at the camera as I speak. Yeah, I was trying to make these boring ass videos a little more interesting, so sound effects and incidental music is something I'm going to include. So yeah, I'll finish this question out by giving you a little overview that I recorded earlier of the incidental music process. Because, yeah, I know nobody asked, but I don't care. I'm answering the question that I made up in my mind by misinterpreting someone else's question, anyways. Because yeah. Okay, real quick, because this is intended to be a cut-in. Here is how I do the incidental music. As you can see here, I use FL Studios for it. I like FL Studios because I can go from the piano roll all the way up to the track arrangement. This is one of the incidental music tracks right here. This is 7.5 minutes, a little longer, of the action music. I am trying to come up with more music to do it till there eventually is going to be like just constant music very quietly playing in the background that reflects the scene. But I've got evil music and I've got action music right now. I need a lot more emotions to build on. So as I create them, I will start using them. This right here, just a build up right here. This point where this marker is kind of a crescendo. As you can see, it reaches that crescendo 2, 3, 4 times and ends on it. And that's pretty much it. I just kind of loop it. There's a build up and then it fades back and then builds up again into a crescendo and then fades back, builds up, fades back, so on and so forth. It's just kind of looped to make it long enough to fit the scene, which of course I have to record, and then I can see how long that part of it takes, and then I know how long to loop this for. And sometimes I have to make little changes because so like one of these build-ups right here is a minute long, and it takes 2 minutes to get to the full crescendo, 2 minutes and 2.5 seconds. So I have to sometimes make little changes, like I have to extend the intro out a little bit. This one I had to trim the intro back, so this is the horns right there. They will be coming in right off the bat along with the drums, whereas usually the drums start first. But that got me to the point where I needed to be right about 7.5 minutes right here, and you can see 7 minutes and 32 seconds. And that's pretty much it. Just knowing having some loopable music and knowing how much time you need to fill
Do that, and then I just add it in video editing. That's it. Yeah, that's all the questions that I had. If anyone asked a question and I missed it, just hop into the Discord and call me an asshole and point out where I missed your question, and I'll record a follow up. Yeah, I just wanted to mention again, I will be releasing a Patreon, a link to my Patreon if you want to support me as an author. That is probably the best way to do it, because that's how I'm going to be able to afford a competent artist to make covers, and afford to do the publication that will bring more people, the advertising and stuff that will bring more people into this tiny little fandom that I've managed to make here. Um, I just want to end by thanking everyone, not just the people who ask questions, although thank you. Nix, NMC0123, Darkman3100, Nick the Great, Another Edward, RJJT456, Night Dragon Slayer, and Heather. I do appreciate you guys asking questions. But I appreciate everyone who reads the story, everyone who listens to the readings on TikTok and on YouTube. There's like 5 people on YouTube who I get like 5 views per video on YouTube, so I know there's some people watching it. Maybe they only make it 7 seconds in or whatever, but I do appreciate seeing those numbers tick up slowly. Everybody who's taking enjoyment from this story, you're why I'm writing it. Why I'm still writing it. I'm literally probably well over 1,000,000 words into the story by this point. And I'm still going, and I'm still fascinated by it. And it's in a genre that I never thought I would enjoy writing in, too. The reason I love it so much is because of all you guys reading it and loving it and telling me how great you think it is, and how much you hate the villains, how much you love the characters, love the heroes. Yeah, you guys are what keeps me going. So I really appreciate everyone who's reading this story, and even just listening to this Q&A from some random author whom you've never heard of. So thank you very much. And yeah, I hope you all have a good night.